Howdy, Dennis Bradford here. Let's think some about being, feeling, and doing better.
What you take to be you is that with which you identify. If you want to free yourself from bondage to unwanted emotions, it's critically important that you examine your identifications critically. In the previous two videos, I hope that it became clear how qualities are universals, which are constituents of becoming. In fact, they are necessary constituents of becoming. The reason for that is that it's impossible to think of becoming without thinking of universals. We saw that, whether instantiated or not, all universals are real. As Butchvarov writes in Being Qua Being, quote, universals are necessary existents, end quote. If you want to know if a certain universal quality is real, are you able to think of something that exemplifies it? If so, it's real. Simple. Individual forms, objects, things, are different from universal qualities. Some are existents and some aren't. Some are entities and some aren't. For example, the forms that are the objects of, say, imagination or hallucinations may not be real. It's unlikely that non-philosophers ever seriously wonder about the reality of universal qualities. They do sometimes, though, seriously wonder about the reality of clusters of universal qualities. For example, when they perceive such a cluster and wonder if they're dreaming or hallucinating. Suppose there was a green blob in your dream last night that was trying to ingest you. Was it green? Yes, there's no question about that. However, was the blob real? No, it wasn't. It was only an individual cluster of universal qualities in a dream. Its greenness, though, is real. Of course, it's possible to dream about real individuals too, but that's irrelevant. As necessary existents, universals don't go in and out of existence. Although our awareness of them may go in and out of existence, universal qualities don't change. Universals are always there to be thought. There's always the possibility that they may not only be singled out, but also multiply singled out. Universals may have spatial location. They may be located wherever they are instantiated or exemplified, wherever the individuals are that have them. Furthermore, unlike individual things, universals may have multiple spatial locations at the same time. In fact, that they appear distinct is what gives rise to the problem of universals in the first place. Is it logically possible for a quality of one individual form to be the same entity as a quality of a different individual form? Yes. Such identity or sameness is the recurrence of qualities. Universals, universal qualities, quality entities, are real. Why is this relevant to a discussion about emotional well-being? It's not just that emotions are universals. That's an important point, because when we are, say, fearful, it's because we have identified with fear and made it personal. If we drop that identification, we cease being fearful. It's also that understanding the solution to the problem of universals relates in an important way to one of the recurrent themes in these videos, namely the wisdom of identifying with consciousness as context rather than identifying with any contents of consciousness. In one sense of context, it can be anything in a field of forms that is not singled out for attention. If, say, we focus on just one leaf in a tree full of leaves, all the other leaves become the context or background for that focused attention. In another sense of context, though, it can be the consciousness itself rather than any form or set of forms in a field of forms. In other words, instead of focusing awareness on a form in a field of forms, it's possible to focus awareness on the consciousness itself that is the awareness of that field of forms. This is the spiritually relevant sense of context. Here's the critical question. Is consciousness or awareness itself more like an individual form, a cluster of universal qualities, or itself a universal? It's true that consciousness is sui generis. It's unique. It's in a category by itself. However, it's also true that we can be aware of it. If you've just been conked on the head or just awakened, and someone asks you, "Are you conscious?" you understand perfectly well what's being asked. Notice that answering the critical question by claiming that consciousness itself is or is like a universal is claiming that it's a necessary existent. Might consciousness be a necessary existent? Yes. If so, like universal qualities, it's always there to be singled out or multiply singled out. Whatever is going on, it's always possible to focus on consciousness, isn't it? Consciousness doesn't go in and out of existence. This is why sages often equate being with consciousness. Although consciousness can of course be about other forms, it itself, like being, is empty of content. Like being, it itself never is in flux. It never seems to change. What if we identified with consciousness itself rather than with any of its content? If we took ourselves to be consciousness, we too would be necessary existence. Just as two or more balls can be red or two or more shapes can be rectangular, so two or more humans can be conscious. Like redness or rectangularity, consciousness is not an individual. If you let that thought really sink in, you may begin to realize why sages are unafraid. Following the argument in the previous video, if all fear is ultimately fear of physical or bodily death, and if we don't identify with our bodies, then all fear evaporates. You may think there's some intellectual trick being played here. Nope. Sages, in fact, often display little or no concern for their bodies. I could report multiple stories about that, including about sages previously considered in this playlist, such as Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharishi and Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. Therefore, it would be the case that if you stopped identifying yourself with your body and instead began identifying yourself with consciousness, all your fears would disappear. Furthermore, so would all other unwanted emotions. Why? Remember that having an emotion requires, in addition to two beliefs, having a sensation, a center of focus in your body that is taken to be the center of the shame or despair or hate or other unwanted emotion. If you were to stop identifying with your body, you wouldn't take such sensations personally. When that happens, emotions cannot be more than beliefs, which, as we've seen, are always based on thoughts. So they cease being emotions. If you also understand that no thoughts are personal, then you realize that unless you identify with them and attach to them, no beliefs or thoughts are personal either. Voila! Unwanted emotions vanish in favor of peacefulness. If you want to live with emotional peace rather than with emotional agitation, emulate sages. Stop identifying with your thoughts, beliefs, and body. There's nothing forcing you to do that. Let's end emotional distress.